This is a Farmdoc Daily webinar. I'm University of Illinois Extension's Todd Gleason. During the day today, we'll talk about how you can become part of the solution, joining the PCM, or Precision Conservation Management for Sustainable Agriculture movement, with Clay Bess, Rachel Curry, and Greg Goodwin. Our sponsors for the day include the TIA Center for Farmland Research, Compeer Financial, Corteva AgriSciences, Farm Credit Illinois, the Illinois Corn Growers Association, FS Growmark, and the Illinois Soybean Association, along with our educational sponsors from the University of Illinois, the FBFM, that's the Illinois Farm Business Farm Management Unit, Illinois Extension, and the Department of Agricultural and Consumer Economics. I'd like to welcome our first speaker for the day, Greg Goodwin. He joins us from the studio on the campus at the University of Illinois for this precision conservation, taking a look at this precision conservation management system. Greg, thank you very much for being with us. I know for those who are interested, right off the bat, you'll tell them that they can visit that precisionconservation.org website that we have up on the page at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Todd, and thank you to the whole University of Illinois Farmdoc team for hosting and producing the webinar. Good morning, and thank everybody online for joining us. And as Todd mentioned, I'm Greg Goodwin with the Illinois Corn Growers Association and the director of the Precision Conservation Management Program. Want to tell you a little bit about PCM. PCM is a by the farmers, for the farmers service program that currently works throughout Illinois and parts of Kentucky and Nebraska. And I will kick us off today by talking a little bit about the program and how we operate with growers in the states and why the program was started by the Illinois Corn Growers Association. So here at PCM, we work to aid farmers along their path to conservation practice adoption and approach this in a variety of ways. We help farmers to understand how conservation practices impact their farm and net returns, help them to understand how they are addressing water quality concerns and working to prevent agricultural regulation, and by helping farmers position themselves to benefit from positive conservation outcomes. And so how do we do all of this? We do this by trying to address precisely what growers are looking for when thinking about adopting conservation management strategies on their farm. And so we do this through one-on-one technical support, a data collection platform to streamline data entry, ensure consistency and accuracy, as well as ease the data entry burden for the farmer. And annually, we provide an individualized resource analysis and assessment plan, or RAP report, which includes things like economic cost tables, environmental assessments, and local practice comparisons to help farmers see how their management approaches compare to themselves through time, to others taking similar approaches, different approaches, and how they compare against farmers of similar land types and at a regional scale. And our Clay Bess will talk a bit more about that later. And so as we know, your time is valuable, and we offer participation payments of $750 to farmers just for signing up and being willing to enter their information. And we also offer access to and assistance with enrollment into exclusive programs that provide incentives or cost share for conservation practice adoption. And we offer networking and peer-to-peer education opportunities through field days and other similar types of events. And so why PCM? And so just to provide a bit of background before handing it over to Rachel, the PCM program was launched by the Illinois Corn Growers Association in 2015 through a Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or RCPP grant, through the NRCS. And this was done to help address agriculture's contribution to the nutrient loss reduction, or to loading into the Gulf of Mexico, and help farmers work towards the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. And with that, I will turn it over to Rachel Curry with the University of Illinois to tell you a little bit more about the background of the NLRS and where we are with respect to achieving those goals.
Well, thank you. Like Greg mentioned, my name is Rachel Curry, and I work for the University of Illinois Extension's NLRS team as an educator. And so today I'm going to give you an overview of why we have the nutrient loss reduction strategy, what it is, as well as how we're making progress towards reaching our goals. All right, so first of all, it's really important to understand what exactly is hypoxia. And hypoxia just means low oxygen. And one of the leading causes is excess nutrients. And we're primarily talking about nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, these nutrients promote algal overgrowth. And then once those nutrients are used up, the season changes, the algae die off and decompose. And when they decompose, they're using an enormous amount of oxygen. And so they're taking that out of the water, which makes it unavailable to other marine species. And so a critical reason that we're trying to mitigate nutrient loss is this hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico. But it's also vitally important to realize and remember that algal blooms are a local problem as well. And so when we have algal blooms in our local watersheds, it impacts our drinking water safety, as well as it can result in the closing of recreational sites. So the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force was established in the fall of 1997 because of the hypoxic zone. And its primary missions are to identify the causes and effects of eutrophication, as well as coordinate activities to reduce the size, shape, and severity of the hypoxic zone. And they have their outlined goals, which is to reduce the hypoxic zone to 1,930 square miles, reduce nutrient loading to the Gulf of Mexico, and to reduce total nitrogen and total phosphorus losses by 45%. And then it was through all of this that the US EPA tasked the 12 highest contributing states that drain to the Mississippi to create a plan on how to reduce nutrient loss from their state, focused on nitrogen and phosphorus. And from that, the Stoner Memo was released, or what we refer to as the Stoner Memo, and it was written by Nancy Stoner, who is the acting assistant administrator for the US EPA. And through this memo, it provided a framework as a planning tool for each state when they're creating their own strategy, and included some minimum building blocks with the idea that these would be necessary for effective programs to manage this nitrogen and phosphorus loss. And so they it outlined 8 elements for each state's nutrient reduction strategy. So each state has to prioritize watersheds for nitrogen and phosphorus loading reductions. They have to set the watershed load reduction goals, ensure effectiveness of point source permits in priority sub-watersheds, as well as address nutrient loss from agricultural areas, address nutrient loss from stormwater and septic systems. They have to have accountability and verification measures for this nutrient loss, as well as provide an annual public reporting of implementation and biannual reports of load reductions, as well as develop a work plan and schedule for numeric criteria. So the original plan for Illinois was released in 2015, and it accomplished elements 1 and 2 that I mentioned. Elements 3 through 7 are ongoing, and element 8 is part of the framework of our NLRS. So this is the Mississippi River Basin, and it encompasses about 41% of the contiguous U.S., and it's divided up into 6 different sub-watersheds. So most of Illinois, you can see, falls in the upper Mississippi River Basin, with a little bit on the eastern side that falls into the Ohio. So this is the most recent depiction of the hypoxic zone, and NOAA goes out and measures this annually. And so this was released on August 3rd of this year, and it identified the size of the hypoxic zone to be a little over 3,000 square miles, which, if you remember, I said that the goal is 1,900 square miles. So we're quite a bit above that. To put that in a different perspective, that's nearly 2 million acres of habitat that's unavailable, which is about the same size as Yellowstone National Park. These dark red zones outlined in black are actually areas that contain less than 2 milligrams per liter of oxygen, which means those areas are completely uninhabitable. Anything that can't leave those areas is going to suffocate. And so that's been very detrimental to the fishing industries down in the Gulf states. This is a bar graph showing the size of the hypoxic zone since they started measuring it back in 1985. And you can see that the size and, of course, the shape has changed. But keep in mind, these measurements are just a snapshot in time. And the changes and the variation is due to multiple factors, and that includes nutrient loss, precipitation, and weather patterns. You can see the running 5-year average is this upper dotted line. And then where we are now is this last bar, and the target is the solid line down there at the bottom. Many states drain into the Mississippi River, said 41% of the US. So why in Illinois should we be so concerned? Well, there was a study, modeling study that was done in 2008 on nutrient loss, and it identified Illinois as being the highest contributor of both nitrogen and phosphorus to the Mississippi and eventually to the Gulf of Mexico. This map shows the distribution of total nitrogen yields within the Mississippi River Basin, and it was part of a report to Congress back in 2022. And you can see that most of Illinois falls into this dark green, indicating that we're a high contributor of total nitrogen to the Gulf of Mexico. This map shows the distribution of total phosphorus yields to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's from the same report. And again, Illinois is a high contributor of phosphorus. This is just another visualization of the state's contribution. As you can see, Illinois is a high contributor. But something else to consider is that nutrient loss isn't just an environmental issue, but it's also an economic issue. As you're very well aware, fertilizer is expensive, and you want to make sure that you are keeping your fertilizer and all of your other inputs in your field where you can get return on that investment. So that brings me to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. And it was created through a collaborative effort by groups like the Illinois EPA, the Illinois Department of Ag, and the University of Illinois. And this collaborative effort is just one way in which Illinois' strategy is unique from other states. And other states are realizing how important these partnerships are and are trying to adopt similar models within their own states. So our plan was originally released in 2015, and it addresses nutrient loads from point sources, urban stormwater, and agricultural sources. So it's really important to note that the plan is not shifting the weight of the job entirely onto agriculture, but also recognizing that nutrient loss comes from multiple sectors and that all of those need to be addressed in order for us to reach our nutrient loss goals. And I mentioned this earlier, but hypoxia impacts our local water bodies as well as, and our local water quality, as well as the Gulf of Mexico. And so we have our long-term goal, which is to reduce total nitrogen and phosphorus losses by 45%. But we also have an interim goal coming up in 2025 to reduce nitrate nitrogen by 15% and total phosphorus by 2020 by 25%. Talking about our goals, and so now this is looking at total nitrogen, nitrate nitrogen, and total phosphorus broken down by their different sources, or what we refer to as sectors. And this is based on baseline data from 1997 through 2011 average loads. Now, we're acknowledging that these have changed over time, and the current plan is for this to be reevaluated and updated, these numbers, for the 2025 biennial report. But the green represents agriculture, the orange is point sources, and blue is urban stormwater. And so you can see that ag contributes quite a bit of the nitrogen and about half of the phosphorus leaving the state. So the watersheds that are outlined on this map are identified as priorities based on the baseline data. And these priority watersheds were identified using total phosphorus and nitrate nitrogen loading data from the science assessment information on local water quality conditions, as well as knowledge of watershed-based planning and infrastructure to identify these watersheds. And so the outlined watersheds are watersheds that are believed to make the greatest impact on nutrient loss reduction here in Illinois. The blue watersheds are the nitrogen priority watersheds, and you can probably observe that most of them fall in the central and northern part of the state, and that's because nitrogen is highly mobile with water, and as it's moving through the soil, when it hits the tile drains, it's going to leave the state, and the majority of the tile drainage systems in Illinois are in the central and northern part of the state. Phosphorus is different. Phosphorus adheres tightly to soil, and so as soil moves, the phosphorus is also moving. And so we're seeing higher phosphorus losses in areas where we're having higher erosion rates. And so that would be in the more rolling topography in the southern part of the state. There are stars on 4 of these watersheds, and those are to indicate the watersheds that are served by Illinois Extension Watershed Outreach Associates. And so we have one person that covers the 2 nitrogen priority watersheds, the Lower Rock and the Mississippi North Central, and one person covers the 2 phosphorus priority watersheds, the Embra and the Little Wabash. So you've already seen this, but since the plan was released in 2015, we've had 3 biennial reports that have been released, with the most recent coming out in 2021, but we do have the 2023 biennial report that will be released on December 1st. And it's already been mentioned, but I'm going to reiterate that PCM began as Illinois Corn's response to the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. So this table is from the 2023 biennial report, and you can compare the baseline, which is 1980 through 1996 in the first column, with the running 5-year average. You can see that the most recent data is we're seeing an increase across all of these. We're seeing an increase in water yield. It's up 23%. And part of that is due to the fact that we've had higher precipitation in 2019 and 2020, as well as higher precipitation overall. And the 5-year water average is greater than the baseline. It has been since 2008. And that trend may continue for the foreseeable future. There's also a concerningly large percent change in phosphorus. It's up 35%. And nitrate also increased, but that can partially be explained because increases in precipitation contribute to increased nitrate losses. But if greater runoff and drainage had caused the increase in nutrient loads, or it has caused some of the increase, but if it was the only cause, then we would have seen changes in nutrient loads that would have been more evenly distributed across the watersheds, and that's not what's indicated by this data. So some of these have already been hit on, but one way that we can work towards reaching our goals is to include conservation practice adoption. And so conservation practices are divided into 3 different categories. We have our in-field practices, and these are part of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. And so they include cover crops, soil testing, conservation tillage, as well as many others. We also have edge of field practices, which include bioreactors, wetlands, and buffers. And then the final one is land use change, and that is taking marginal ground out of row crop production and transitioning it to a perennial or energy crop. And all of this information, as well as information on nutrient loss and the NLRS, can be found in a recently published nutrient loss reduction strategy and ag conservation practice fact sheet that is one of your handouts for today. So the approved practices are put together in strategies or scenarios that help us meet our interim and 45% reduction goals. And so originally a set of strategies and practices were put together as part of the 2015 plan. But since the initial plan was released, there have been some modifications to the different scenarios on how we're going to reach our goals that better align with the available information, as well as provide a better measurement of our progress. These scenarios are also updated, so when conservation practices are added. This particular scenario is called NP7, and it's just one possible scenario, and it represents the level of practice adoption that's needed to reach our 2025 interim reduction goals. The orange bar represents the implementation level as of 2019. And the blue bar represents the interim nitrogen reduction. The light purple is the interim phosphorus. And as you can see, each conservation practice has room to improve as we work to reach our goals. Now, this will be reevaluated to reflect the data from 2021 and 2022 with the 2023 biennial report. This slide is just one of the scenarios in which to reach our 45% reduction in both nitrogen and phosphorus. The navy blue bar represents the 45% reduction for this particular scenario. The orange bar again represents the implementation level as of 2019. And so you can see that we are making progress towards reaching our goal implementation, but there's still room for improvement as we're working towards reaching those goals. And again, this is going to be reevaluated in the 2023 biennial report. So there is a process to add a new practice or update a previously added agricultural conservation practice to the list of approved practices within the NLRS. And an application for a practice proposal can be found on the NLRS webpage that's housed on the IEPA website. And the application, once it's submitted, is reviewed by the steering committee and then passed along to the NLRS science team for their review. The science team will develop a consensus as to whether to recommend the practice, not recommend the practice, or not recommend the practice now and return it to ask for additional information and research. So once a practice has been successfully reviewed, then it will be presented to the NLRS policy working group with the final recommendation about including it in the following biennial report, and that will be added to the list of approved practices. So over the last 2 reports, we've had 3 practices that have been added. And this past September, my counterpart and I gave a webinar on those practices, and you can find that webinar. So when we're looking at where we are currently, this is from the NASS survey that was conducted in 2022, and it was based on the 2021 growing season. And so when we're talking about nitrogen management, there were 11 million acres of corn planted. And of that, 76% used MRTN or lower nitrogen rates. 31% used fall and winter fertilizer with nitrification inhibitors. 40% used spring-only fertilizer. 34% used spring fertilizer with nitrification inhibitors. And then 35% used a split fertilizer application. When we're talking about phosphorus management, we're seeing that a little over 6 million acres had phosphorus application rates that were reduced since 2011. And when farmers were asked why they reduced their phosphorus fertilizer application rate, the reasons included that there were updated removal rates in the Illinois Agronomy Handbook. They were utilizing soil test information and other reasons, including the cost of fertilizer. Now, in the 2021 crop survey, the results indicated that fewer acres on which the phosphorus application rates were reduced as compared to 2019. And the survey analysts believe that the wording and the position of the questions within the survey may have caused some confusion, which resulted in lower numbers in 2021 as compared to 2019. So moving forward, the question wording is under development for future surveys. And then we're also looking at the cover crops. And so I mentioned that there were 11 million acres planted in corn. So of those 11 million acres, only 4.1% were planted after cover crops. And there were 10.6 million acres planted in soybeans. And so 8.4% of the soybeans were planted after covers. So totaling 6.4% of the crops planted in 2021 were planted after cover crops. So I mentioned this earlier, but part of what makes the Illinois nutrient loss reduction strategy unique is the number of partnerships. And these organizations on the slide have all been very supportive of the NLRS and are working together to meet its goals. Many of them have representatives on the NLRS policy working group, as well as advise on the NLRS biennial reports. So these organizations and others have contributed data and to the biennial report to showcase how we are working together to move the strategy forward here in Illinois. And it's very unique and exciting to see so many diverse groups that are coming together to meet a common goal. But I also just want to take a moment and highlight the industry has really stepped up to help farmers meet their nutrient loss reduction goals. And since I have a captive audience, I want to share some of the other resources that Illinois Extension has out there. The Nutrient Loss Reduction podcast, which is co-produced by Todd Gleason, Nicole Haverback, and myself, just released our 57th episode last week, I think. And Nicole and I have also created a supplemental blog that started in December of last year. And so far we have 16 posts on the most recent podcasts, as well as working on creating blogs for previous podcast episodes. And if you want to get a more comprehensive update on where we are towards reaching our goals, the next biennial report is set to be released on December 1st, and will be available at go.illinois.edu/NLRS. That's also where you can find the original report, the previous biennial reports, as well as a lot of other information. And I'm also going to plug the annual NLRS conference, which is happening on January 25th. It's open to the public, and it is going to be in Springfield at the Illinois Department of Ag building. But if you are unable to attend in person, there is a hybrid option available to you, and you can register now. The registration is open.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. And so we'll get into the PCM portion. So who is PCM? So introduce you to the folks that are working with farmers one-on-one in order to help farmers address the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. And we'll tell you a little bit about that team and how it works. So first, like every other successful program, this one would not be successful without the help of amazing partners such as the Heartland Science and Technology Group, creators of the Farmer Portal, our data intake and reporting platform. Also specifically the Illinois Soybean Association, who came on as an equal funding partner to Illinois Corn in 2020. And they're helping to provide additional technical support and direction to the program. And in addition, PCM has also been successful due to the support of both private and public partners, such as PepsiCo, Walmart, the NRCS, and the USDA, to help us offer custom incentive programs to provide technical and financial assistance to farmers for conservation practice adoption. And in total, you'll see we've got over 30 partners on this list, many of who are also partners on the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. And these folks have either committed cash resources or in-kind match to our federal grants. So we just want to, thank all of these partners and really do appreciate all of their support and helping support farmers in the meeting the needs of the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. So moving on, we'll give you kind of some insights into the current footprint of our team and where they're located and who you might be working with if you're in one of these areas. And so we've currently got 10 full-time conservation specialists who work directly one-on-one with farmers, 8 of which who are in Illinois, servicing approximately 35 counties. And then we've got 1 who works with farmers in Nebraska, who I'll show in a minute, as well as 1 in Kentucky who works in about 10 counties. And you'll hear a little bit later from our operations manager, Clay Bess, on some of the details behind how we're working with farmers, and he'll highlight different aspects of the report that we provide farmers and the insights that are provided from that. So here, just wanted to give a quick showing of the counties that we work in Kentucky. And so there's approximately 10 counties in total in 3 different priority watersheds, those being the Lower Cumberland, the Lower Green, and the Purchase. And this is done with the support of the Kentucky Corn Growers Association and the Conservation District Support down in Kentucky as well. And we also work in about 60 counties out in Nebraska through partnership with PepsiCo. And this is also supported by the Nebraska Corn Growers Association, as well as the Central Platte Natural Resources District, where we house our specialists, and we appreciate their support as well. So this kind of rounds out the boots on the ground team for PCM. And so I wanted to just give you some insights as well into the leadership and support, the behind the scenes folks that support those boots on the ground people. So while not all of these folks work on PCM 100% of the time, many of these folks do work tirelessly behind the scenes to continuously improve the program, help us manage and communicate out the learnings from the program, as well as draw meaningful insights from our cooperator data and help us reach farmers far beyond our direct farmer participants. And before we transition into how PCM works with farmers, we need to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the work and legacy of the late Glenn Salo of Heartland Science and Technology Group. Through his direct work with Dr. Laura Gentry to develop PCM, Glenn absolutely had a profound influence on the development of PCM with respect to the design of the farmer data portal and the visualization of data to make it relatable to farmers. We will absolutely dearly miss our friend and colleague Glenn Salo and his contributions to PCM as we help carry out his and Heartland's mission of, trying to work collectively for the public good. This is the mission and values of their organization, and we share those at PCM. And recently, at his celebration of life, Austin Arrington had prepared a tribute to Glenn, and we thought he said it super well. His pivotal contributions to the Precision Conservation Management Program in partnership with the Illinois Corn Growers Association provided farmers with essential tools to understand the delicate balance between environmental impact and financial prosperity. And we absolutely agree with that, and we're really going to miss working with Glenn. Important to note, his team is carrying on all of the same values and mission at Heartland, and we look to support them as they make the transition. Moving on to how does PCM work with farmers, I am now going to hand it over to our operations manager, Clay Bess, to walk you through what the enrollment and data collection platform looks like, and then how we are working with farmers to provide insights from the data they share with our program.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, so step one of a farmer becoming enrolled in the PCM program is to create an account and get all of their data entered into that account through our farmer portal. This is done with the help, if not totally by their specialists within PCM. So it's a very simple process for the farmer. Going to our website and then creating their account through the login feature, where they would go enter their email and a password to protect their account. This is the first time where I'll make note of our security behind the data and the privacy and protection that we have of our farmers' information and their data. This process here is something that if the farmer is enrolling, it's pretty simple. An email gets sent to their specialist who can confirm that that farmer belongs in the portal. Otherwise, if there's a farmer outside of our territory that's logging in, then they're going to have to be contacted by a specialist, or I'll reach out and let them know that they don't have a specialist in their region, but they can still join and enter their data. And if it's a non-farmer trying to log in, then I'll reach out as well just to see what interest they have potentially in partnering, or just checking in to see how we work with farmers. So that's level one of our security behind the data that we store within PCM. Whenever the farmer has expressed their interest and is ready to enroll, then, as I mentioned, we'll have our specialist do just about everything it takes to sign the farmer up. That'll start with an enrollment meeting that can last anywhere between 30 minutes and a couple hours, depending on how extensive the operation is, or how many different programs a farmer implements within their operation. And this sheet here is just getting the basic information that the specialist needs to sign the farmer up, and then to work with them, know a little bit more about their operation of what they're getting into. Once that enrollment process is done, which 90% of the data is collected in the summer, we'll obviously follow up after harvest to get yields, transportation information, and drying information for the corn crop. But after those couple of meetings, we are ready to generate our favorite deliverable, farmer's favorite deliverable, and that's what we'll get into here, this resource analysis and assessment plan, the RAP report that Greg mentioned. This meeting here is going to last up to 2 hours. We'll deliver these in February and March. You get a snapshot here of what type of time commitment we're talking about for a farmer. We hit on the enrollment meeting. We hit on the harvest data collection meeting. We'll get into this RAP delivery, and then there'll also be phone calls throughout the year to talk about practices and different programs a farmer is eligible for. At the beginning of the report, we are going to hit on a handful of high-level topics. The first thing here is making sure the farmer is aware of all the different programs and opportunities that are out there for them. Some of them are going to be exclusive through PCM for our farmers that we've worked with our partners on to offer for our growers. And then we're also going to make sure that we're trying to look at and find out every program that's available out there to the farmer. So even ones that are not exclusive to us, but just letting farmers know that there are other financial incentives out there, or maybe even better technical service than what we can provide, or other practices that a farmer might be interested in. We don't do a ton of EduField, which we'll get into, and I'll make a note of that, but we definitely like to let farmers know that we have partners and resources that are out there to help them with that. We'll hit on the nutrient loss reduction strategy within this local resource concern page. This is our education piece, maybe the biggest education piece outside of the individual practices that we're going to give a farmer, and letting them know where we're currently at within the NLRS and any updates related to those local resource concerns that they could be affecting with their farming practices. We'll definitely hit on the security here, which I've already mentioned once. We'll tell a farmer that the data that they enter into our portal, anytime that it is shown outside of that report, it's going to be aggregated and anonymized. So we are very, very sure of that safety around the farmer data and protecting that information. Once the farmer goes into our portal, there's a bolded code down at the bottom, and that's what a farmer turns into once they go into our system. So their name is stripped from that data, and that allows us to aggregate it and anonymize it. I mentioned EduField practices. Here's our philosophy on infield. We're going to try to fix any issues with infield practices first. So we focus on tillage, nitrogen management, and cover crops. We want to keep land that's in production. We want to keep that in production and help these farmers fix any issues with those conservation practices. Within the report, next we'll move into the data sections of the report. First, we'll give a summary back to the farmer of how many fields they have in the program, how many acres. We'll give yields, nitrogen rates, nitrogen use efficiencies, how many pounds of nitrogen does it take to raise a bushel of grain. That's the summaries we'll give to the farmer, and even this becomes a valuable piece to our growers who are sometimes keeping this type of information in multiple notebooks. We always give the example of keeping data in shoe boxes in their office. This is valuable because we keep it concise in just a couple of pages of the information and data that they're interested in. Once we're done looking at the summary of the data, we'll talk about the MRTN rate, the maximum return to nitrogen. I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with that U of I recommended rate. This is another education piece, and this is a time where we will compare a farmer to that rate, have those discussions around how our most profitable farmers do fall within that MRTN rate, and then begin the discussion of how to reduce that into the MRTN range for that farmer's operation. We will let a farmer know where we believe they stand or where our data shows they stand for conservation trends, give them this scorecard, basically a report card, hopefully showing improvements as it relates to those three practices that I mentioned, cover crops, nitrogen, and tillage. And we'll track that throughout the year to hopefully show continuous improvement. We'll also considering different factors that obviously play in year by year. We also use the Field to Market field print platform to assess farmers on these sustainability metrics of land use, soil conservation, energy, greenhouse gas emissions. Field to Market produces field prints. There is a ton of information in those field prints. However, sometimes it can be tough to understand exactly what we should be looking at. So what we've tried to do here is to split out each of these sustainability metrics, show them in its own graph. You see there in the land use chart, we can point to a farmer and show them how their individual fields are affecting their average or their year by year analysis, and then compare them to other PCM farmers or other farmers that are using a practice that we see as most beneficial. So that's the land use chart you see. We also do the same sort of comparison with the operator and land return there at the top of the slide. We also consider the Cool Farm tool as it relates to the greenhouse gas emissions. The meat of the report comes in this version of an economic analysis. So these are very similar to what Farmdoc produces, very similar to what the Farm Business Farm Management group produces. And what we've done here is using line items and pairing FBFM economic data, Farmdoc economic data with actual agronomic information from the farmer. Pairing those two things, we generate these tables here that we can then compare how the individual farmer looks versus the regional average versus the county average, to give them an idea of if they're doing better or worse, or if there's any improvements that we can make within those decisions. After that, we'll dive down to a deeper level of an individual field page. And here is where a specialist, after talking about the economics, then they can come here and make a note about a suggestion or a recommendation. And we do that there in that blue box and that empty box there next to the field map. And that's going to happen with all this other information you see on the slide. So a summary of all the years of what's happened on that field, a chart over to the left that's messy to you all looking at it right now. But what that's saying too, once it gets cleaned up a bit, is how a field compares to other fields within the operation. So what we like to do is maybe find a field that's holding a farmer back or is consistently the most poorest field within the operation, and then use that field to make a suggestion on for a cover crop, or maybe changing up the nitrogen rate, reducing a tillage, things like that is what a specialist might be making a recommendation on. That would be the end of the report. Like I said, 45 minutes to a couple hours for the report. Next steps will be following up, matching a farmer to a program, and then just helping them step by step with implementing any of those practices that the specialist might have recommended. That's, like I said, that's the end of the report. I'll turn it back over to Greg.
Thank you, Clay. And yeah, so, we can basically design any kind of a report we want. But what do farmers think about these reports? We have to be striking a balance between what we believe is useful and what a farmer finds useful. And so that's what we've tried to do. And so we have taken a survey of our growers to basically try to understand what they do or don't find valuable about the information we're putting out. And we have some of those results this year to share with you. So we'll just go through quickly what we asked the farmers. So the format was that we anonymously asked a series of questions related to the interactions with their specialist or the perceived value of different components of the wrap. And we had about a 25% response rate, which for the number of producers we had answer, that was roughly 100 or a little fewer than 100 folks. And basically asked them a series of questions that I'll get to in a minute, and asked whether they, strongly agreed, were neutral on that question, disagreed, or strongly disagreed, and others, whether they were very likely, neutral, unlikely, or very unlikely as far as to continue to work with PCM. So have some of those results to share. So questions that we ask: did the specialist communicate the material clearly? Did you learn something new? Was the material relevant to your farming operation? Will it be easy to apply the information that you received? On the whole, the economic cost tables, did they represent your farm financials well? And then are you likely, after meeting with your specialist, to go back and review and spend some time with your RAP understanding the value? And then based on the information you received, were you likely to change your tillage, try and expand cover crops on your farm, or change your nutrient management plan? And you may find, I'll get into this in a minute, but the way we ask the questions around change your tillage or change your nutrient management plan, we didn't necessarily account for the fact that some farmers, who may already believe in no-till or reduced tillage, that they would answer that question negatively based on they do not want to change from those. So we got to really squint at those results, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then which of the following sections did you find most valuable? And then based on your experience, how likely were you to continue to work with PCM? And then how likely would you be to recommend PCM to a neighbor? So here we have those results compiled in this table. And so you can see how we've broken it out. We combine strongly agree and sort of a positive response, and then disagree and strongly disagree and sort of a more negative response. And by and large, we have really positive responses to the report. So 100% of farmers agreed that the specialist communicated that material clearly. 98% felt that of the farmer respondents said that they had learned something new. 97% felt that the farming or the information was relevant to their farm. 90% felt the information would be easy to apply. And then 80% felt like they were fairly represented by the economic cost tables, 16% being neutral and only 3% disagreeing. And we feel really good about this. May not have stated it super clearly, but we use average cost tables utilizing FBFM average data for the state based on those accounting records. And so we're not necessarily taking in each individual farmer's financial information, both to keep the data burden light and also to help keep an apples to apples comparison for farmers. And so the fact that 81% feel well represented by this information is really good in our minds, given how we're going about this data collection. And so I mentioned we kind of have to squint and we'll reword these questions next year to understand the impacts as far as conservation tillage adoption with respect to the data, and the same for nutrient management. But did want to highlight the percentage here related to try or expand cover crops. We did word this in a way where it was evident that the positive responses here did indicate that farmers were willing to do this, and a 63% response on try or expand cover crops on their farm based on the information they received, we thought was really positive, especially given the current adoption rate of cover crops, not only in Illinois, but across other states as well. And so feel like we're really driving at something valuable to farmers from that standpoint. And so also feel really good about, about the number of farmers that are likely to stay in PCM. So 95% responded either very likely or likely, with only 1% unlikely. And we found out later through the comments that farmer was actually going to retire. So it wasn't because they didn't like what they were receiving, but only because they were getting out of farming altogether. And then we also found that 90% of respondents were likely to recommend PCM to a neighbor. So felt really, really good about that, and probably gives us some insights that we need to get more peer-to-peer networking opportunities available for them. Here, just looking at the percentage of total respondents that felt each of the listed RAP sections were most valuable to them and their operation, and they could select multiple sections. So the main takeaway here is that we see 5 out of the 7 sections of the RAP receiving a vote in terms of being valuable to at least 22% and up to 53% of respondents. And to us, this sort of indicates that while every section may not be valuable to each farmer, that each farmer is likely finding at least one or more of the sections valuable. And so we really like the idea of that, and that we're providing information broadly that is valuable to each farmer. And so quickly, we'll just kind of give a overview of the footprint of PCM from a farmer participant's perspective and number of acres and fields. And so as previously mentioned, we've got 10 full-time staff that work directly with our farmer cooperators and are currently working as of September 6th with 496 individual farmer cooperators collecting data on over 415,000 acres and over 7,500 individual fields. And it's important to remember that each field is a data point. So when we're sharing out our aggregated information, you're getting field level data that goes into that. And annually, we also summarize all of this data for Illinois in our annual publication called The Business Case for Conservation. And this is released in June as an insert into the Prairie Farmer magazine. And if you'd like to learn more about the data released here, please go back and look at the webinar back from September that featured myself, but primarily Dr. Laura Gentry and Gary Schnicke, as well as Megan Miller. Again, you can go back to the YouTube channel and Farmdoc and find that webinar. And this information is also utilized in other Farmdoc articles by Dr. Gary Schnicke and some of his students as well. And just to give some insights into how many people we find that this reaches through webinars, conferences, field days, and other peer-to-peer events, we estimate that we're reaching approximately 7,500 people, in sort of real-time interactions, and then approximately another 10 to 12 times that many through print and digital copies that we release through social media and things like that. So we're trying to provide value far beyond just the cooperators that we do work with directly, and really appreciate them being willing to work with our program and supporting our mission in doing that. And so Clay touched on this a little bit earlier, but can farmers earn money through working with PCM? And the short answer is yes. We've got through PCM, we can connect you to several different incentive and cost share funding opportunities, including local, state, federal, and private dollars, some of which can be stacked. And that's one service we take pride in trying to offer our growers, is helping them navigate the space. There's more funding going out to farmers than ever has been before, and it can get very confusing, especially the rules around stacking programs in order to give you the most bang for your buck in terms of when you're looking to make a practice change. And we have a number of programs available to farmers if they're willing to adopt new conservation, and some able to pay for existing conservation practices. So do reach out to us to learn more about these opportunities, no matter what your operation may look like. And I'll kind of wrap up before we, I think, go back and give Rachel an opportunity. I think she's back with us now and able to continue on with her presentation. But finally, we discussed a lot, obviously pretty focused on PCM here and how we work directly with farmers, but we want to acknowledge there's a lot of other great work happening in the conservation space with many other similar missioned organizations to PCM. And you can learn about a lot of those through the Illinois Sustainable Ag Partnership. There's others like the STAR program, and others not only focused on in-field, but also edge-of-field practices. And so we collaborate, pretty effectively with most of those other organizations, and generally want to move all farmers, help them advance in this conservation space. And so please do reach out to us if you have any questions, and we're happy to connect you to those other resources. And we will come back to this as far as landing at precisionconservation.org. So again, thanks to everybody who's a Farmdoc sponsor, as well as the education partners. And thanks everybody online for sticking with us and joining us today. And we'd be happy to answer any questions with the time we have left. So first question, this seems geared towards Rachel, but how seasonal is hypoxia?
Well, hypoxia is it's there. It's just the size and shape of the zone that varies. So that's not really a very good answer, but I'm not sure that I have a better one. Does that answer sort of?
Yeah, I think that will work. Another question we've got here. So if the goal of Illinois is to reduce total nitrogen and phosphorus by 45%, why is there only a relatively small amount of counties that are eligible for these programs? So part of what you may have noticed about how the initial regions for PCM are laid out are that they do overlap with the priority watersheds, or several of the priority watersheds that Rachel mentioned in her slides, as far as trying to target and address nutrient loss. So we have targeted specific areas based on that. It's also that there are limitations to time and money. However, there have been more funds interjected into this space than ever before. And so we have started to capitalize on that. We're a part of 2 of the USDA Climate Smart Commodities grants. And so with that, that's going to provide some opportunities for a little bit of expansion there. But oftentimes it just comes down to resources. And so, we're trying to do well with what we have. And part of our mission as well is driven by the fact that we feel farmers, even outside of those regions who we don't work with directly, can benefit from the data that we collect. So another question we have is this due to state, county, federal, or PCM's decision? And I suspect that's maybe related to the previous question. It's a combination of those things, I guess. I guess it's in part limited due to funding, and as well as PCM's decision. So, not only are the regions basically overlaying some priority watersheds, they're also strategically located with respect to different soil types and the amount of rainfall and the landscape that we've put those regions on. And so we feel as if we're getting a relatively representative sample, especially in the state of Illinois, with respect to collecting data that's relevant to all farmers in the state of Illinois. So that's kind of how we're trying to address where we've located regions. And then what action can a farmer or landowner take to have these programs expanded into a county that is currently excluded? So excellent question. And, primarily that's related, again, to resources. I'd say if there's a ton of interest there, please reach out to us and we can try to also find other partners that might allow for that expansion to occur. But at the end of the day, we're employing real people and there's real expense to that. And there's also expense, obviously, to the incentives that are offered to farmers. And so some of the programs are statewide. And so we could help farmers navigate those opportunities. And we are willing to answer questions for farmers, even if they fall outside of regions, with respect to statewide opportunities. But that's ultimately kind of how those decisions are made. Is PCM likely to expand to additional states? I think the short answer there is yes. Again, that happens sort of strategically in time. And one thing we've been very cautious about with respect to expansion into new states is, wanting them to be championed by the commodity organizations in those states. Part of what we feel is super important to PCM and how we keep those valued relationships with the farmers is that they're sort of championed by the commodity organizations and at the end of the day have farmers' best intentions at heart and in mind. And so that is how we have sort of done that. And it also boils back down to resources and what states are interested. And then water quality wise, is tilling a positive or a negative? Oh, tiling. Sorry, I misread that. Tiling. Would maybe kick this over to Rachel to explain that question. Don't know that there's a definitive answer there. It may depend on landscapes, soil types, things of that nature. But Rachel, do you want to take that one?
I can try. So tiling is important to make sure that the land is farmable. And so what we're not saying that tiling is terrible, it's necessary, but there are ways that we can utilize different conservation practices, infield, edge of field, to try and capture those nutrients before they reach our water bodies.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. I think that concludes the questions that we had, and we appreciate everybody joining us today. And again, if you have any questions or want to know more, please do reach out to us, precisionconservation.org. Thank you.
Thank you.